Welcome to the Cinephiles, the new KARE 11 Plus show where three movie lovers get together and talk all things film. Each episode, we're going to highlight some new releases that we think you should see, and we're going to dive into some hot takes on movies that we love as well. Brian Eggert, Jamie Rogers, Chris Arabsky, we're here, we're loving it, and the first film we want to get to is F1, Brad Pitt, coming at you. Let's take a look.
Okay. Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston, now McLaren, all have a speed on the straights. Our shot is battling in the turns. We need to build our car for combat.
How am I supposed to make that safe?
Who said anything about safe?
All right, so this is the latest from Joseph Kosinski and Aaron Kruger, the writer-director team who did Top Gun Maverick. And it's essentially the same idea. Brad Pitt is kind of an old hotshot who's brought in to revitalize a Formula One team that has a young hotshot on it, played by Damson Idris. He drives recklessly and wins. The plot really, there's not really much there in terms of the plot. There's a corporate kind of takeover thing going on with Javier Bardem, who runs this company and who brought in Brad Pitt. There's a little romance with Carrie Condon that he's got, and she designs these cars, but really it's about just the audio-visual experience. This is something that you need to see in theaters, and on IMAX preferably. I mean, it's completely overwhelming being kind of in that car where the camera is placed in the car looking at the driver on the outside of the car, and you're experiencing how dangerous it is on the road. There's also a great propulsive score by Hans Zimmer, which I hadn't noticed at the beginning credits that it was by Hans Zimmer, and it sounded like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Oh, heck yeah.
It was just an awesome score.
Cool.
So check this one out in the theater. I think it's not something that you're going to want to wait for to watch, on your device or even a good home theater. You need to be immersed in that IMAX experience.
Yes, get off your couch.
So I haven't seen this one, and you said the camera shots looking into the car. In theory, they use the same technology that Top Gun did, like in the cockpit, those sort of cameras.
Totally. Yeah, and you feel just sitting there, it's overwhelming, and you had that sense when you were watching Maverick, like you were in the plane. You feel like you're in the car. It's a really cool feeling. I wasn't really expecting to like this movie. I don't care about driving at all or racing at all. I don't follow Daytona or Formula One, but I was converted. Yeah.
I feel like Brad Pitt has said that he's like a Formula One IndyCar fan.
Yeah.
And they filmed at Formula One races?
Yeah, they were driving, I think they were driving not at top speeds, but they were doing some driving of their own. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, which is cool.
Awesome. What'd you give it?
I'd say see it.
Atmosphere.
Definitely see it. In the theaters.
In the theaters.
With a giant popcorn.
Absolutely.
And a cherry Coke.
And a cherry Coke.
Maybe some Milk Duds.
I feel like they all kind of taste like cherry Coke now because they come from that one machine.
No,
right?
okay, so here's the thing about that. Fun fact,
what?
boys and girls.
Oh, yeah, you used to run a theater.
So the Coke freestyle machines, when you go get cherry Coke, vanilla Coke, those flavored Cokes, at least the one at my theater, those flavored Cokes were actually Coke Zero, and that's why it tasted funny. Because it wasn't regular Coke with a little bit of cherry. It was Coke Zero with a lot of cherry.
What?
So, hack, fill it about 3/4 of the way with cherry Coke, and then top it off with regular Coke, and then it tastes just fine.
All right, this is what I'm talking about. Cinephiles, on point. All right, next up, we have an A24 film. This is The Materialists.
Hey, are you single? I'm a matchmaker. Give me a call if you want to meet somebody.
I deserve someone who fulfills all of my criteria.
Nothing over 20 BMI.
I don't want someone who likes cats.
I'm trying to settle.
I promise you're going to marry the love of your life.
All right,
Jamie, take us through it.
This is Celine Song's sophomore feature. She is the one behind Past Lives, which was a perfect film in a lot of people's opinions. This follows a young, ambitious New York matchmaker played by Dakota Johnson. And it's kind of the trials and tribulations of being a matchmaker, but also the trials and tribulations of being single in New York. Dakota Johnson, to be honest, is kind of just stereotypical Dakota Johnson in this film. She doesn't really have a lot of heart. She's kind of soulless, a little bit more mathematical than full of emotion, I guess I would say.
Sure.
It kind of gives me like Sex and the City vibes because it's a young girl, she's single in New York, she loves the glamour of New York, and and money, but she doesn't really meet that threshold necessarily.
Does she have to pick between like Chris Evans and?
Essentially,
her deal?
yes.
Okay.
Pedro Pascal.
So she's a matchmaker, but she has to match herself.
Correct. She feels like really put together on the outside, in my opinion, but she's kind of a mess on the inside. Pedro Pascal is a rich single New Yorker. He has a $12 million apartment in Tribeca. Chris Evans is a struggling, more poor actor trying to make it, so he's picking up waiter jobs, those sorts of things. But they are exes, John and Lucy, Chris Evans and Dakota Johnson. So it's kind of like a reuniting those two characters and seeing if there's anything there, while she's also dating Pedro Pascal and seeing if there's anything there. The one thing that kind of took me out of it, because I love this movie, don't get me wrong. It feels very rom-com, rom-drama-y. I love that sort of thing. But she makes $80,000, I think is what they said. And I don't know a lot about living in New York, don't get me wrong.
Not going to get you very far.
I live in Eau Claire. I took home, after taxes and deductions last year.
You don't have to say it.
$40,000.
Oh, geez.
And I struggled. So $80,000 in New York seems like, to me, nothing.
Right.
And
that's what bugged you?
guesstimating.
Was her salary?
Well, yeah, because I feel like that drives a lot of her decisions, but it also
Money.
took me out of it because I'm like, she's not living in that department or at that apartment
Yeah.
for $80,000.
What'd you think?
I liked it. I think, to me, it drew a lot on Jane Austen. It kind of reminded me of Jane Austen, Wreck My Life, that we talked about a few weeks ago. In that it's sort of taking those Jane Austen tropes. There's the love triangle of Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion, and she's a matchmaker like Emma, and it's applying them to a modern setting. And I really like how she critiques how objectifying the whole matchmaking process is. I like that she critiques sort of the transactional quality of marriage in some cases. I like her faith in marriage when it's about love. I thought that was very endearing. And I like that she went dark with it. I mean, she explores how matchmaking services can make mistakes, and that can have some serious, very traumatic consequences.
And all of that is very real, whether it's the traumatic aspect of the storyline or just the materialistic aspect of the storyline. Like, some of my friends have been like, "You're too short, I can't date you." Like, how is that anything that anyone would ever say to another person?
Right.
Like, that doesn't compute to me, but it's a very real thing that people experience.
But that's because you're a real person
Well, yeah, but
with a real soul.
these are real things that people experience. I need someone that makes $100,000. I need someone that's 6 foot tall. Like, I don't know. It just those things seemed really real.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
story.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I just wanted to mention that it's also not like a typical rom-com, in that there's some artistry behind the filmmaking. It's not just like kind of this bright, nondescript.
Happy-go-lucky.
Right. There's some artistry behind the visuals and the soundtrack.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I say see it. That was the
That was my
question you were going to ask.
Yeah, see
but
it.
the one thing that I was going to say is, like, Pedro Pascal almost feels miscast in this film, but I feel like that's also on purpose, based on how the story navigates their relationship.
Why? Because he becomes
So-
like a villain type guy, and he's no longer that way.
But I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. I was kind of soulless for a little bit, but
All right.
then it made sense.
I liked him in the role, actually.
Then it
but-
made sense
but-
after a while.
Well, you guys are disagreeing now. This is good. You liked him? Why?
I thought he was very, very charming, and you're supposed to kind of fall for him, but there's also kind of a pretense to him that you learn later in the movie that isn't necessarily authentic. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'd say see it. It's an unconventional romantic comedy, even though it's playing with a lot of conventions.
Okay, we got a couple of see-its. Good deal. All right, coming up, rage-infected zombies are still haunting the United Kingdom, and we're breaking down 28 days, 28 weeks, and 28 years later. Welcome back. This weekend, the long-anticipated Legacy sequel, 28 years later, hit cinemas nationwide to mixed but mostly positive reviews. This sees the return of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, who have said that this is the first in a trilogy of movies in this series. So a new three-peat here. The second has already been shot. The third is likely dependent on this one and the second one and the next performance. But Cillian Murphy is attached to the third, we understand as well, right? Killian was in the original 28 Days Later, but he is not in this film right here. All right, let's get into this whole series here and what's happening. What was your take on this?
So 28 Days Later, I think, is a monumental film. I mean, it came out in 2002 after probably about 15 years or so in Hollywood of a lull in zombie movies. There was George A. Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, some spin-offs of that, and 28 Days Later really reintroduced zombies to the culture. Not only that, but like fast-moving zombies. And just, they're technically not zombies. They're alive. They're infected with rage, which is a bioengineered virus that has escaped a government facility.
Social media.
Sure, yes.
When he's right, he's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a visceral experience in that he's shooting with mini DV cameras at the time, consumer grade, just purchased at a store.
Yeah.
It looks nothing like any movie that you've seen at the time or since. They just aren't going to make another movie like that. It's critiquing, post 9/11 paranoia and kind of mistrust in our institutions, and showing how easily society can collapse. And it's also just a great horror movie. For me, it's like one of the all-time great horror movies.
I couldn't agree more. 28 Days Later was, for me, it opened up the genre of zombie. That was like the first one, and it sort of made it a new age. This is a post 20th century zombie movie was the first one. But what was crazy about this, and we were talking about this earlier, is like that was sort of our generation's OG zombie movie, right? And there's so much that came after, whether it's Shaun of the Dead, or whether it's HBO,
The Last of Us.
The Last of Us, or you even had The Walking Dead, which in every one of these shows redid the zombie, and I think they did it really well. But 28 Days Later was the OG for us.
Absolutely. I agree with what Brian said about it playing off of the post 9/11 anxiety of not feeling safe in your home and stuff like that, because I think this was the first one that actually did that, and then it probably inspired The Purge and Disturbia and all these other movies.
It's incredible.
But I really liked, like you said, how they shot it on those DV cameras, because it feels almost like when you're watching Killian walk around London in those hospital scrubs, that you're just picking up a camera off the street and like watching what somebody else had recorded before they died or got infected or disappeared or whatever.
Right.
So I thought that was really nice.
It's also Killian's like coming out party, man.
Yeah.
That was his big breakout.
Yeah, he and Naomi Harris too, I think, are just, she's fantastic, and their performances are surprisingly, soulful by the end. I find she's sort of a diehard survivalist who doesn't believe in making connections, and he thinks connections are the only thing to do. And by the end, it's surprisingly moving. It's kind of got everything that you wanted in a horror movie.
Absolutely. And I know that like Danny Boyle and Alex Garland weren't attached to 28 Weeks Later, but I feel like that was definitely in 28 Days Later, and then 28 Weeks just kind of felt soulless. Like it was just
it was a sequel.
There to be there.
Yeah.
I was mad at the kids the whole time. I was mad at the dad. I was like, I don't like this. And I know some people love it, but I'm just like, this makes me mad.
Didn't add up. Yeah.
I think it's fine. It's a fine horror movie. I don't think it's anywhere near any comparison to either days or years. Is just it's nothing. But just watched in a silo. It's pretty well made. It's got a good cast. You got Idris Elba before he was a household name.
Jeremy Renner
before he was a household name. Rose Byrne. And it's scary. There's some scary sequences, and it's kind of commenting on how the U.S. military maybe does more harm than good when it's trying to occupy another country. But that's all very slight, and it's all very disposable. There's some, as you said, the kids and the whole family plot contrivance is very frustrating, and it just doesn't really.
You're just sitting there, and you're like, you are not about to do that. Right. Are you serious?
Yeah. There's a lot of that in that movie, and but it is scary at times, and I appreciate it for that.
Absolutely.
All right, the rage virus moves on. 28 years later, what are we thinking?
Brian and I have different opinions on this one.
Excellent.
Based on Letterboxd.
Okay.
Brian can go first.
Oh, you want to go first?
Sure,
Let's do it.
sure. I think there are some issues with the movie, particularly just its requirements of setting up a trilogy. I think that it's two bookend kind of storylines that it's working with that don't really work, but everything in the middle is excellent.
Okay.
It's about this kid, 12-year-old kid, Alfie Williams. His name is Spike in the movie, and he lives in this island community. The rest of the world is free of the rage virus, and this island has been surviving kind of as like naturalists. You know, they're hunting with bow and arrow. They're raising crops and stuff, and his kind of ritual, the community's rituals for him to go off and hunt infected, and he's kind of exposed to, kind of all as we all were in the post-COVID world, how the world has been sort of factionalized into cultural bubbles, and there are bubbles, you know, that are based in religion or nationalism. The manosphere is its own little bubble, and he realizes that you know, the infected have formed a community, and that's a community based on rage, which is very, I think, relatable these days.
Social media.
Social media. So the rage infected have evolved. There's a kind of a leader, an alpha, a very large, very smart infected. There are other kind of different types, and it's all very disturbing, but also very kind of melancholy and poetic, because this kid is just trying to find his place in the world. And I found that fascinating. And again, it's very dynamically shot on iPhones for the most part. And there's some great casts in it. That, you know, it's got Ralph Fiennes and Jodie Comer, who's excellent, and Aaron Taylor Johnson. It's a different tone. It's a very kind of pensive, searching tone, and I love that about it. What I didn't love, and probably won't love until the whole trilogy is complete, are these kind of bookend storylines that they're using to set up.
Oh, they didn't
what's
finish it,
happening.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's the first one.
Right.
All right.
So
You disagree.
I guess mostly we do agree. I must not have read your review, but I saw that you gave it like 4 or 4.5 stars, and I was like, I don't know about that. That seems a little bit much. But like you said, there are these bookends, and the beginning, the front bookend, I understand. You're trying to get people back into the story. We're still in a situation where there's a rage virus. People are in harm's way. It's scary. Bring us back into what we've been out of for a decade. The end.
Oh boy, you get your teeth. She
I
got her
know.
teeth. Okay.
So some of my friends are horror fanatics, and I put on Letterboxd that the middle 95% is great, but those two bookends were an airball. And one of my friends was like, "You didn't like the ending?" I loved it. That was my favorite part. I was like, "How was that your favorite part?"
Oh no.
Because it gives like kick-ass Kingsman church scene, bullet train, ridiculous action that kind of feels like it's supposed to be in a comic book
But it
movie.
came out of nowhere?
And I'm like, we needed to cut this 4 minutes ago.
Oh, no.
Like, there's an ending in my brain that's perfect,
I had the
and
same
it's
thought.
not this one.
I had the same thought. There's a point where it could have ended, and I would have been like, "That's a masterpiece."
Exactly.
And it didn't end.
They jumped the shark on their own.
And I get it. Like, you're trying to tie the beginning into what's to come, which apparently is going to come in January.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
28
really
weeks.
shot it,
28 weeks after its opening.
Ding, ding, ding. Simulation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just like, I love the middle. There's emotion. There's, you know, a conversation about masculinity and when Alfie Williams' character should be allowed to quote unquote hunt the infected. There's an emotional arc with Jodie Comer as his mom. The entry of the Boots poem from World War I is a masterpiece because not only is it very eerie in the way that it's edited and performed, but it also has a commentary on the community itself, because post-war everybody, you know, is trying to rejuvenize and rebuild, and
Right.
that's what they're doing, but they're also kind of regressing to that time period where only the men can hunt and only the women can be teachers and farmers and help give birth and act as midwives. And it plays on both of those roles, and it's so creepy.
It's a cultural reset.
Yeah.
I also like how he's editing in images of like archival wartime footage and Laurence Olivier's version of Henry V, and just kind of commenting on how there are these groups where you're told the world is one way, and you know sometimes the world is not that way, or you don't agree with what you're being told, and you kind of have to separate from that. And that's such an insightful way to frame this character. And I really hope this character Spike, the kid, lives throughout all three movies,
Yeah.
and we see him grow into an adult.
I'm
and-
excited for that because this is his first movie, so we're not only going to be able to see him come of age as a character, as Spike, but also on screen as an actor and see how he progresses, and I think that's really cool.
So what do you give the movie?
I would say don't miss it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I loved this movie. I wish that it wasn't a trilogy, but I think, if the other two stick the landing, I'll come back to this and say it's a masterpiece.
That's
But
a rare don't miss it
I would say don't miss it.
from
yeah.
you.
Yeah, I would say see it. I'm not surprised that Brian says don't miss it. But my problem is I've never been into zombie movies, so I don't really care. It's the emotion of this movie that kind of brought me in to it. And the like young farmers or whoever did some of the music for it is phenomenal. I don't know if you guys know the scene in The Gentleman, the TV show by Guy Ritchie, where the Lazy Habits song "Starting Fires" is playing while they're like filling the the Mary statues. That in my brain is like the perfect entrance of music. It's perfect needle drop. And in the Rafe Fiennes scene where the emotion is, there's a perfect score that's been made by the young farmers, and I think that's great.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're not going to take a break. We're going to move right on into the third bag
Beautiful.
here, okay?
Okay.
Last episode, my Cinegift to the folks was Paths of Glory, which is a Stanley Kubrick film that he did long before 2001 Space Odyssey and Full Metal Jacket and all those wonderful films. I picked this film as a sort of homework assignment because I studied it in college, and I took a class on Kubrickian films, and this is one of the first black and white films that ever blew me away, both in its depth, its quality, its emotional takeaway. The acting's incredible, starring Kirk Douglas, but it's based off of a true story, and it's based off of a terrible reality of war. It takes place in World War I. And it's French are trying to, gain ground in no man's land there against the Germans, and a sort of a crazed general orders them to advance and move forward to certain death. And the fact that on the second wave, a lot of these French soldiers don't move. He even sends artillery fire into their own area
He
to get them to move.
He
or
doesn't
attempts
actually
to.
do it.
But then what it turns into is a trial, right? And it's a trial of these soldiers that have to be selected to be put to death because they're an example of what happens when there's cowardice and when there's, treason or whatever you want to call it. So, what did you think? You haven't seen this movie before, right?
Correct. I really enjoyed it. I can see the influence that this movie had on every
lot.
war movie since. Like,
Oh, sure.
the first thing that I thought of when we're going through the trenches is the Long Oneer from 1917. I was like, this, I can see where everybody got their inspiration. This is beautiful. But it made me mad because of how egotistical and how manipulative some of these men in this story are. And it's real.
Welcome to war.
Exactly. Like, I know that this is what happened.
That's right.
But I don't like it. But
Good.
we
It should
don't
make
live
you
in a
mad.
perfect world. So of course the movie doesn't end perfectly. The things that happen aren't perfect. Like, I get it. But it did give me a visceral, like, oh, I want to punch that guy in the face.
Yes,
You know?
Yeah, that's
That's
how
right.
you should
Yeah.
feel. Yeah, it's so frustrating. All the injustice and hypocrisy on display is really disgusting. All the kind of social hierarchies within
Yeah.
the military ranks are again disgusting.
If I may, you know what's crazy? Is that this was made in 57. And imagine all the examples of what you just described since 57 to now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this
That's what he's doing.
This movie was banned in France because they couldn't take it. It was banned on U.S. bases, U.S. military bases,
Sure.
because they couldn't take it
Yeah.
because it was just pointing out that sometimes duty isn't the best approach. I think that's what kind of the last scene articulates is we should all have a little human compassion.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely lacking in military logic.
Yeah, your
Absolutely.
duty shouldn't be suicide and sort of the arrogance of a general who just wants to gain an inch for no reason.
Right.
I
And,
do feel like the Colonel Kirk Douglas's character having the other soldier who picked, because it seemed like the other two groups of soldiers, they randomly chose who was going to be the
Executed.
executed, the one that had to deal with the court martial. But there was a through line of this guy hates this other guy, so he's going to choose him But then Colonel Dax is like, oh, you chose him just because you hate him? You get to be the one that calls the shots. You get to be the one that demands that he gets shot. You're in charge of that now.
That's right.
And then you're going to have to deal with that on your conscience for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So this is based on a true story. This happened in France in World War I. There's a famous episode where there was like this.
The practice is called decimation, where you're executing people as an example in order to
Right.
inspire other soldiers to, be
not
brave.
be cowardice.
Yeah.
and-
Right.
Make an example out
But
of somebody.
again, it's just like if you're going into a meat grinder. It's a horrible thing. There was one other copy from 1917 though, and a couple other movies as well. The ending of this movie is what makes it one of my favorites ever. As Kubrick does, he always makes this sort of emotional stamp or philosophical stamp on the world. And the ending of this movie is no surprise to you. We've already described what it is. But the last scene is all these soldiers who just went through hell. And they had their guys executed because they wouldn't go execute themselves via suicide. Just, you see the hell of war. And they're all sitting at a bar drinking their worries away. And this German girl gets up and just starts singing. She's forced to sing, and they're yelling at her with Barbary and screaming at her, "You sing," right?
Yeah.
But then as she starts singing, their humanity is restored. They discover the beauty of her voice, and they stop being a-holes, and they start being sort of children again in awe of beauty.
Well, that, and I feel like they recognize the humanity in her and how they actually have a connection to her. She's not just a prop up there because
restored their humanity.
It's a lullaby that they recognize, so they start humming it. And there's an analogy in that lullaby where that lullaby, while it seems, children and hopeful and beautiful, the way that she's singing it and the way that they're humming it, that lullaby actually ends really terribly. And we're in a war movie that ends really terribly.
Well, you studied the actual song, yeah?
Yeah, the song is about like a soldier who goes off to war, leaves his lover behind, and then finds out that his lover is dying, and he leaves his post to visit her on her deathbed. And yes, she dies, and that's sad. But it's also just about how that love is more important than duty, and you need to have some human compassion as opposed to watching that scene. You wonder if the French may know German and they may understand those lyrics and may understand what she's saying and identify with that and realize, oh wow, we've been catcalling at this woman,
Incredible.
and now we see her as a human being, and it's a deeply moving scene and kind of restores Kirk Douglas's faith in humanity, I think, at the end.
Absolutely.
All right, we got 1 minute left. Do you want
Beautiful.
to assign the movie for?
Yeah.
It's your turn, right?
Yeah.
it's Brian's turn.
So the next Cine Gift is a movie called High and Low from 1963. It's made by Akira Kurosawa. It's being remade in August by Spike Lee in a movie called Highest to Lowest.
Let's go.
It's an awesome kidnapping thriller.
Okay, leave it there. High and low?
Yeah.
All right, that is the Cine Gift. You watch it, we'll watch it, we'll talk about it during our next show.
Absolutely.
Deep Focus Reviews, where we can find you.
Check me out on deepfocusreview.com or Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm on Letterboxd and Twitter and Instagram. I don't know.
You can
Wherever.
find Jamie Rogers, or you can watch
It's
us
Jamie
like
Fools on
Carolina.
all platforms.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Appreciate it. This has been the Cinephiles. We'll see you next time.